Hello, I'm Krista West of Avlea Folk Embroidery, and in this how-to video, I'm going to show you how to work a complex drawn thread hem. This is the drawn thread hem technique in which you do not remove the threads past the corner, and we'll go over that in step-by-step detail. So the first thing we need to do to prepare for our drawn thread hem is to trim our embroidery. You've always got a little bit of extra seam allowance on all the sides, and then there's usually the portion of the embroidery, the fabric that's been serged when you get an Avlea kit. So what we want to do is we want to actually trim the fabric down so that we have the exact hem allowance we want. Now we do that by pulling a thread. So what I've done on this embroidery, I've decided that I want a 1 3/4 inch hem allowance. I'm going to make a little bit narrower hem on this one because, as you can see, it's a really big design. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out 1 3/4 inches right here. I've already got my needle marking it there, and I'm going to very gently pull out that thread like this. I'm going to pull a little bit of it up, and then I'm going to just work that thread out of the fabric very gently, kind of gathering it a little bit, and then kind of scooching it along so that that thread just comes out of the fabric, like that. You want to do this just very gently and carefully. Linen and embroidery fabrics are pretty tough, so I mean, the worst that's going to happen to you is that the thread might snap a little bit. And if it does that in the middle, sometimes that happens, it snaps in the middle, then you just pick up the thread. You can see where it's being pulled out, and you can just pick that up and just keep removing it. I should note too that I always recommend starting in the center. Don't start at one end here or here. Start in the center because that way it's less tension on the thread and it makes it a little easier to remove. So now you can see I've pulled that entire thread out. And as you see here, I now have a really nice channel for trimming the embroidery. The reason we do the pulled thread is it's going to give you an embroidery that is very crisp and even because you're actually working with the threads. You're not just kind of cutting anywhere. So now what I'm going to do is take my scissors and I'm just going to cut down that channel. And I'm going to trim off that excess fabric. And now I've done that on, this was my last side. I've actually done that on all 4 sides of the embroidery. So I'm going to do this, and then next I'm going to take it to the ironing board and I'm going to prep the hem. Now we're at the ironing board and we're going to press over our hem. The way we're going to do this is you'll notice that this embroidery has a really straight line of stitches here, and I'm going to press the hem. I'm going to fold it over to that first line of stitches and press that first, like this. And I'll keep going across, but for the purposes of the video, I'm just going to show you that section. Then I'm going to take this and fold it in like this, and that will create my doubled hem. And I'm going to do that along the entire length of the embroidery. And for everyone who is wondering, my iron is a HiSteam SVP-24. It's a professional tailor's iron, and I use it because it's what I have in my workshop, but you can really use any iron to do this. You do not need a fancy iron to do this. But I will admit the steam on this one is pretty great. So now I'm going to keep pressing this around, and I'm going to press this hem in all the way around, and then I'm going to come back to this corner, and we will fuss with this corner just a little bit more in the next step. As you are pressing this doubled hem in, there's a little trick at the corner that I want to teach you. You'll notice that as you're pressing that hem in, and you go to press the next section, that a little bit of this, there's a little bit of fabric that sort of sticks out beyond the hem. And that's just because you're pressing along the bias, and on a longer run like this, like when you do that, you're going to have that. It's really normal for that to happen. So you're going to have that little extra bit of fabric there. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit on that. And so you'll see here where that you've got that, just that little extra. Now, what I always do when I'm doing this is I take just a second and I just trim that little bit off. It just makes tucking this into that corner that much easier. So now I can very easily and smoothly tuck that into that corner, if you can see that. And I'm going to do that pretty much on every corner as I press across. Okay, we've pressed the doubled hem in all the way around the embroidery. And now we're going to prepare the corners. We're going to miter the corners because that's kind of a key part of drawn thread hemming. So I've got my iron handy, and my corner right now looks like this. It's folded over double in both directions. I'm going to open out my corner like this, and you'll now notice a whole little crisscross of fold lines. So if you can see those there, there's just a whole bunch of little fold lines. You'll notice that the fold lines closest to the embroidery form a 90-degree angle. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the point of the embroidery opened out, all the fold, all the hem allowance opened out now, and we are going to press it to the corner of our embroidery, keeping those 90-degree lines lined up. So when you fold this one over, it's going to line up here. And when you fold this one over, it's going to line up here. And you're going to have a perfect little diagonal. And then we're going to press that. Don't worry if it erases some of your other fold lines. That does happen. It's not a problem. So now we have this, and it looks like this. Then what we're going to do next is we are going to trim that because you have too much bulk. If we tried to fold all of that bulk into the hem, it wouldn't fit. It'd be very lumpy. So we want to get some of that out. So we're going to take this and we're going to just trim a little hem allowance like that. We're going to trim off that little bit, that little triangle there. Now, now what's going to happen is we are going to basically, this is going to fold in, and then these little guys are going to fold in on either side, and you're going to have this like beautiful little mitered corner. But to make that a little easier, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take this and we're going to seam a little tiny seam right here. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to fold this back on itself like that. We're going to bring it to this side and have the lines of our embroidery lined up like that, okay? Now, if you can see here, we have this diagonal line goes from here, and then it hits the first little fold line, and then it keeps going on to the cut edge of the fabric. What we're going to do is we're going to actually sew a little itty bitty tiny seam from the point at which it comes to the corner here, just to the first fold line. That's all we're going to do, just to the first fold line. And I'm just going to sew that seam just with some really easy, just whatever sewing thread I have around. I'm not going to even knot it. I'm just going to take it, do a couple of little anchor stitches, but I'm really careful to not go beyond that fold line and to exactly follow my perfect little diagonal pressing line that I have there. And I'm just going to sew that in like that. You can just kind of go like this. You can kind of do like little back stitches or a little running stitch. This little seam is going to be so well settled once we actually work the drawn thread hemming that it's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be like a crazy stable sewing seam. It doesn't have to be done on the machine. Just do it by hand. This is like an extra little step that we're going to do, and you're going to take it like that, and you're going to keep sewing it. There we go. And then when you get to the end, you'll go all the way, as close to the end as you can. Like, I even try to get like just kind of a thread away, and I didn't do it right there, but like that. And we're going to go all the way there. And I am not going to put a knot in here because a knot would create a lump in the thread, in the hem. So I don't want to put a knot there, but I'm probably just going to go over it maybe one extra time just for a little extra security, like, whoop, if I can, like that. And then I'm going to trim my thread, leaving a little bit of tail, just a little bit. like that, because you're not really going to see this. Then what you do is you very carefully, we're going to take that corner and we're going to turn it and fold it inside out and turn it right sides out. And you're going to end up with something that looks like this. Okay? Now you're going to notice that it's not quite perfect. So you're going to take either a bamboo turner or a chopstick. If you don't have a bamboo turner, just use a chopstick. And you're going to very gently ease out that corner like that. Now, another little trick you can do too is if you can just take any sort of little pin or even a little cross stitch needle, and you can kind of very gently open out that seam like this to get it to really lay open, to kind of pull that open. Now you'll notice we still have a little bit of a mess we need to clean up here. It looks like this. Our corner looks pretty good, but we've got this little mess now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to press those little pieces back where they go. We're going to press that in place here, press this in place here like that. And I can see already that my corner is not quite as clean as I would like it. So I'm going to keep using that bamboo turner to kind of get it, there we go. Usually just kind of like has a little moment where it like pops out. And we're going to do this, and we're going to then put that like that, and we're going to give it a press like this. And adding that extra little bit of just doing that little seam by hand is going to mean that when we come around and do the drawn thread hem, we're not going to have to worry about that corner. That corner is just going to be there. We need that in place to be able to do the more complex form of drawn thread hemming, because we are going to actually pull threads just back to that corner, and then we will hide them in the hem. So we've got our corner, and we are going to do this on all 4 corners. So I have my hem all folded in and pressed on every side, and I have made my little hand sewn miters at each corner. I've popped a pin in those corners just for a little extra security. You don't have to do it, but I like to have it there just because it kind of helps keep everything in place. Now I am going to start pulling threads, but this is where this variation of the drawn thread hem is different than my simple drawn thread hem. In the simple drawn thread hem, you just start pulling threads and you pull them all the way to the end, and they just come out of the fabric, and you have a little bit of like spaces at each corner. But for this more complex method, what we're going to do is actually pull out the threads just to the corner, but not beyond, so that our corner looks extra special. So what I've done is I've gone around my embroidery, and I've looked at the threads between the embroidery and between where the hem is folded, and I've counted to make sure that I have about the same number of threads on each side. And for me, that number is 12. I have 12 threads between this edge here and between the folded edge. So if I'm going to take out 3 threads, which is kind of a good basic number for a basic drawn thread hem, nothing fancy, I'm going to take out thread 12, thread 11, and thread 10, counting towards the embroidery. So just to clarify that, if this is the edge of the embroidery, I count the threads 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 is the one closest to the hem, the folded hem. Thread number 1 is closest to the embroidery. So now, when we do this for the complex version, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to zoom in. What we're going to do is we're going to find thread 12 right here on this side. I have a needle here marking it, and I am going to pull that up like that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take scissors and I'm going to snip that. And then I am also going to pull up the thread next to it, which would be thread 11, very gently and carefully. Pull up thread 11, and I'm going to snip that. Then I'm going to pull up thread 10. So now we have these 3 threads here that are all, there's. You just got to make sure you're looking at them carefully. There's thread 12, 11, and now I'm going to pull up, let me make sure I've got the right one here, and then thread 10. This is the point at which this technique is just a little fussier technique, because what I'm going to do now is very carefully, I am going to pull out these threads, working back just a few threads at a time till I reach the corner. So I'm going to pull those out just little bit by little section by little section. This is kind of fussy work, so you're just going to do that very carefully. If your thread ends up being kind of thick in any spot, you can notice like this linen thread's a little thick. Go ahead and just trim it because it'll create less friction as it's going, as you're pulling it out. And what I'm going to do is pull these out all the way back to the corner, but don't pull them, leave a few threads till you get to the corner. And I'm going to keep working and pulling these out very gently, very carefully. Just keep pulling them out, working my way back to the corner. Now that I've pulled out my threads almost all the way to the corner here, let me get up close so you can see that. Almost to the corner. I've left about an inch or so before I've gotten to the corner. I'm going to now pull out the threads from the next midpoint of the embroidery back to that corner. And again, I count it out, and I'm going to start by removing thread 12. One option you have is to actually not try and trim all 3 threads at once, but just trim one of them and then remove that one out, and then trim the second and remove the second one out, and then trim the third and trim the third one out. Try both methods and see which one you find works better for you. And just to give you a close-up of exactly what I'm doing, I'm taking out thread 12. Again, just very carefully, a few threads at a time. So I'm taking out a little bit of it, and then I'm finding the next little point, and I'm taking out maybe a ½ inch at a time, if that. So that's why this just goes a little slower. You don't want to just pull on the thread because you'll pull it past the corner. And you want to leave the threads in place. And when that happens, when something like this, where the linen can sometimes get a little bit thick, you can just trim it like this as you're working. And it helps keep the bulk down, and it will make the threads a little easier to remove. So again, I'm just pulling these out a little bit by just little bit by little bit. Like that. Now we've pulled the threads. You can see how I've removed all the threads on this side to the corner, almost to the corner, and all the threads on this side almost to the corner. So we're here at that little corner, and all you're going to do right now is just pull back the outer threads first all the way to the corner until those 2 outer threads basically meet. So there's that one on that side. And here's this one on this side, if you can see that. Like that. If I can get it, there we go. And that's going to pull out that way. And then we do the next one. And we pull that out like this. Pull that one out. Okay, here we go, carefully. Now we're going to pull the second one out on this side. You want to leave these with a little bit of a tail because we're going to use that tail to tuck it into the seam allowance, into the hem allowance here. Now we're going to pull this one out and get the last one out. Actually, this one needs to come out a little bit more. I just noticed that. So now we have this one out, and we're basically just going to get all of those pulled back to the point at which they meet. And you'll see it here in just a minute. Oopsie, wrong way, wrong thread. Okay, we got that one there. Now we're getting these here, pulling them out. It ends up being a little bit of a tangle of threads at this point. And I'm almost there. We can see here I've got 3 on one side and 3 on the other. And that's what I want it to look like, is 3 on one side and 3 on the other. but you've got to get them kind of pulled back to that corner and figure out where they are. There we go. Sometimes you have to kind of play with them a bit and figure out which one goes where. So we're going to pull that out like that. Okay, there we go. And now we can see that our little corner is coming into view like this. Here we go. Now that's what we want. We want that little open corner like that. That's a thread we want to stay there. And then what we do is we are going to take the 3 threads from the one side and the 3 threads from the other, sort them to their respective sides, and then we're going to trim them with scissors, leaving about 1.5 inches or 2 inches like that. And then we're going to tuck them in the hem like that. And I can tell already that mine are a little bit crisscross still, so I need to kind of work with these a little bit more. Like that. And then I'll tuck these in, and I can already see here where I don't have them quite cleanly drawn out. So I may need to work just a smidge more to get that perfect little square and make sure all of those threads are drawn out. Like, oh, there we go. There's the one that's kind of giving me trouble. And then there we go. And we've got those tucked into the hem. So those are now going to get tucked into the hem like this, kind of back on themselves. And that gives you that kind of perfect little open square at the corner. Now, when I get to this point, what I like to do is pop a pin in here, just because by this point I've been working over this hem quite a bit. And I'm going to put a little pin in like this, just to kind of hold things in place. And next up, we're going to start working the drawn thread hem, which is actually really easy now that we've got this whole corner already dealt with. So we'll do that next. Now we're going to start working the drawn thread hem stitch. And it's actually quite easy to work. You're going to use just a regular sharp embroidery needle. You want a sharp one. It's a little tougher to do this with a cross stitch or a tapestry needle. So for this, you definitely want to have, like, I usually use like a number 7 or a number 8 embroidery needle. And then you're just going to want some sort of simple white thread. I use Gutermann or just kind of whatever I have in the workshop. Doesn't need to be fancy because you're not going to see it. So what we do is, you can see we've got this corner done, and I've actually got this done on every corner. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to start about, maybe 1 inch before. And here's how the drawn thread hem stitch works. I am going to sink my thread first. You don't use a knot because you don't want a lump. So to do that, I'm going to pull my thread through. I'm going to leave about a 1-inch tail in the hem here. And then I'm just going to take just a couple little threads over to, I kind of create like a little anchor stitch, but you're definitely going to want to do that twice. If you do it once, it always pulls out. So give that a little kind of anchor stitch twice. Now, what you're going to do, and again, in case this is not clear, I'm working from the wrong side of the fabric. You definitely want to be on the wrong side of the fabric. And I'm going to go in here and just pick up 3 bars, 3 little bars there. So if you can see that, I have picked up 3 little bars of the portion of the embroidery where I've withdrawn the threads. I am going to take those, wrap the thread around them, pull that out, and now I'm going to put my needle back in where I started and kind of angle up to where those 3 bars ended. And as soon as I do that and I pull that snug, magically it's going to pull those little bars together. And I am going to just keep doing this across the row. When I get to the corner, I'm just going to travel my thread around that corner and just keep going around the other side. And that's how you work a drawn thread hem. Most of the time I draw 3 threads. I pull 3 threads together into that little bar. You can vary that for different effects. So you could do 2 bars or you could do 4. Sometimes with really beautiful complex drawn thread work that's kind of a type of embroidery in its own right, they'll actually pull out far more threads and they'll do all sorts of decorative stitches in the middle, and that's really neat too. But for finishing a folk embroidery piece, this is a really, really, really great hem. So that's what I'm going to keep doing all the way around the row. Now, you'll notice as you're working around, you're going to find little fiber fluffs. It just happens. So as soon as I get to those, I kind of pull those out as I go. And again, I'm wrapping the bar, 3 bars. I'm taking 3 bars, I'm putting the needle in and going around them. And then I am pulling that out. You'll notice too that I put my thumbnail in there to kind of hold it tight while I snug it. And then I put it in at the beginning of the bars and I come out at the end of the bars. And that's what pulls them tight and makes them into like a little unit. And I'm going to keep doing that all the way around the embroidery. So we're at a corner and I wanted to show you one more option you have for the corner. Instead of just traveling the thread through, another thing you can do is use a buttonhole stitch. And let's see, I'm going to actually zoom out a bit so that you can see what I'm doing with my hand. I'm putting the thread like this and I'm coming through it like a loop. So it's kind of like this big loop that I've created. And what that does is it kind of creates this lovely little anchor stitch that you can use here to kind of keep, again, I'm throwing the thread around in a loop and I'm grabbing it like this and I'm pulling the needle through that little loop of thread. And what it does is it really kind of tightens down that corner and makes your corner look really neat. And now I'm just going to finish across with my drawn thread hemming stitch until I finish the entire piece. So I finished working my drawn thread hem all the way around my piece, and this is what it looks like when it's done. I recommend giving it a good press from the wrong side when you're all done. That'll help set your hem, and it'll help also kind of show off your drawn threads a little bit more. And as you can see, that's what this hem looks like. It's just this beautiful hem finish. It's fantastic. It works on almost any fabric, any woven fabric, and it works fantastic on counted thread fabrics. I would just encourage you to try this multiple times. I will say that it took me a couple of times to really get the technique down, but once I did, I absolutely fell in love with it. And it's now my preferred way to finish embroideries. It just looks neat. It looks great on both sides. It's just a fantastic technique for you to have in your embroidery toolkit. Thanks for watching.